everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a professional artist, clinical hypnotherapist and well-being expert working with those in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions, and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast begins now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. This week on the show, we speak to writer, activist, and Labour representative Margaret Corvid. Her writing has featured in every newspaper imaginable as she reflects in words her thoughts on politics and the human psyche. Recently diagnosed with autism, she takes us on a journey through life as a neurodivergent and what that means to her now in political and social engagement. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to the life of the party and poetic assassin herself, Margaret Corvid. Hello, Margaret, and welcome to The Brave Moment. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I met you at an open mic night in Plymouth where we were both reading some fantastic poetry. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love you to kick off the show with your lovely poems.
Okay, so the first poem that I'm going to read on the show today is called Inauguration. All of our families should be cheering us, but they're going through the motions because they're hurting, because they're drowned too, because nobody taught us how to show our hearts to each other. So there are gods instead on the parade line, superheroes and goddesses, muses and furies, panthers and wolves and giraffes, and slow singing women, and rustling trees reaching up into the heavens. Only at long last, when the scars are all twisted shut, do the poems come that bring tears to the eyes and make the heart beat faster. They are the gifts of gods, superheroes and goddesses, muses and furies, who know that the true gold is not the yellow metal wrought into a flower, but the yellow flower that inspired it, that can only be photographed, sung and prayed and whispered, and that if plucked is gone in a day, and that if eaten by a bright-eyed goat is cut off from generations of admiring bees, but becomes the soil that grows the next generation.
Wow. Oh my goodness. There are so many lines in that poem that shook me, one of them being the Twisted Skyline. I absolutely loved that. What does that poem mean to you? What inspired you to write it?
I was inspired to write this poem by the performance of Amanda Gorman, who is the wonderful inaugural poet who read The Hill We Climb at the inauguration. And, the scars that are twisted shut, scars, they can heal, they can stop bleeding, but sometimes scars never leave invisibility. There's always a parsable mark there, and they twist shut. They don't always close neatly. And so, after the Trump generation, the Trump 4 years, it's the opportunity we have to maybe heal, to maybe sort things out a little bit, but to realize that the scars go so much deeper than just one administration. It's, hundreds of years of white supremacy, and other injustices that we have to contend with.
I think it's unbelievable the amount of information and feeling that you can put into one piece of work, and just expressing, you're expressing the pain of a whole nation of people when you're expressing through your poetry. And it's really, really apparent how much you care about your country as well. What inspired you to just start writing from the heart? What inspired you to look at these political processes and express them through the art of poetry?
I mean, I've been writing poetry and I've been political my whole life, so pretty much the same time, probably for both things. I'm autistic. I wasn't diagnosed until later life, but, with the understanding I've gotten now, one of the features of my autism was an affinity for words, for the English language, and also an affinity for history and politics. And so there were a lot of things that I couldn't do growing up, but writing and reading and understanding that sort of stuff was something I could do. So I did it, for that sense of creation, that sense of mastery, the capacity to learn and to express and to communicate, when in so many other areas, that's not something that I could do quite so easily.
That's incredible that you got diagnosed later with autism. Do you think because you are a woman, that is the reason why?
100%. Autism was seen as a boy's disease because girls who had autism were suffering from the social forces that girls face to fit in and to sort of mask and to be like everybody else. So girls' autism symptoms were often not apparent in the educational setting. And there's a whole generation of us, women about my age, a bit younger, a bit older, that are called the lost generation, because we are folks that didn't necessarily get the diagnosis until later in life, or may even have structural barriers to getting a diagnosis at all. But we're just now coming to the understanding of autism as an identity, as a political group, and, as part of the movement for neurodivergence and for disability justice. So we're really, really just getting to the point where boys were many decades ago.
That's utterly unbelievable. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to actually receive that diagnosis. And did it feel like a part of you had been discovered, or a part of you had been accepted in some way?
For me, getting the diagnosis was incredibly joyful, successful, validating process, because when there's something wrong with you, quote unquote, and there's something that you're having access barriers to achieving, whether it's in the social world or whether it's in, school or in work or anything else, if you don't know what's going on and why, capitalism will tell you the story that the problem is with yourself, with your character, that you're lazy or you're mean or you're evil or you're bad or you're just weird. And then you'll feel like you're disposable, like you're not a valid human being. But when you have an understanding that, there's nothing wrong with you, you just process the world in a different way, then you're not alone anymore. You're part of a community. You're part of a group of people. You're not somebody who has a bad character. You're somebody who has access barriers, and you can ask for social accommodations to those access barriers. And you can celebrate what it is that you are good at. So it's been a huge blessing in my life. Thank God for the NHS, because that's how I managed to get my diagnosis.
They are utterly unbelievable, just as a sector in our society. And I know that, being in the UK, we are so incredibly, incredibly lucky to have them. And I'm really glad for you in particular that they were able to give you that sense of location in yourself, all of these feelings and emotions that you were trying to express in a societal way that wasn't really set up for that expression. So that makes me incredibly happy. And weirdly enough, it's a funny thing, but a lot of artists and poets in particular that I've spoken to, regardless of their sort of neurodivergency, they do also feel like they're expressing from a different place, like they're sort of outside of the box of society. Do you think that kind of rings true?
I think it does ring true. Preparing for this podcast, it was a really useful process for me, because I was really thinking about my artistic work and where it comes from. And as an autistic person, I'm going to be picking up on details and patterns that maybe neurotypical people won't necessarily pick up on. And I'm going to be making my interpretation of the world. They are the perceptive material through which I construct, my reality around me. And it's not that I have an advantage over neurotypical people. It's just that I'm seeing different stuff. I might be missing a whole lot of other stuff, and therein lies the access barriers. But, I can write a poem that is a list of facts or a list of items on a screen, sensory items like the light, the quality of the light, some ducks in a pond, the hum of an industrial generator, and I can evoke emotion from that in a way that maybe a neurotypical person wouldn't necessarily approach the same topic. And it's not saying one way is better than the other. They're just different, and I think they complement each other. I think neurodivergent writers and artists are trying to communicate not just to themselves and to other neurodivergent people, but to the whole world. And I think it just enriches the human experience of art and writing that these types of works and these types of creators are being looked at in a new light in recent years. So that's pretty great.
I love listening to you talking about poetry and the way that your mind works, because the language that you do use it's so how can I describe it? It's like melted chocolate to my ears, I think is the only way I can describe the language that you use in your poetry. It's so delightful and just tangible, really, in a way that I haven't seen in a lot of street poetry in particularly. They have a different kind of pack of punch, but yours almost feels ethereal sometimes with the language that you use. It's so vivid and beautiful to witness. Talking of that kind of finding patterns and seeing things in a different way, when you write, are you conscious of rhyme or rhythm, or does it just flow in the way that you're stating now?
Well, one of the things that I did very deliberately was I had an interest in formal poetry. So I write a lot of sonnets, and I've written various other types of structural formal poetry, things that have a rhyme, things that have a meter. And in that kind of vein, if I hear a phrase or if I say a phrase that's in my meter, I'm like, holy heck, that's in my meter. And I'm just going to down tools and write that phrase down. And from a single phrase or a single image, the whole poem comes. I usually write them very quickly. You just got to keep writing. If it's poo, just write the poo. And then when it's done, you can fix it up. It took me a lot of years of practice to get to that point. And, I would really just be open to the fact that a poem could come at any moment, whether I'm thinking of a phrase, or whether I hear a phrase, whether I see something written down. And it's just like, okay, this is going to take 20 minutes. Unless I'm in the middle of something else that can't be stopped, I'm just going to down tools and I'm going to write this down. And then I can save it, put it away in my phone, get back to whatever actual work that I was supposed to be doing, and then come back to it later. And improve it. I've also found after like 4 or 5 years of writing almost exclusively very structured poetry, the benefit of that practice is coming out. And I'm able to write non-structured poetry, like the one I just wrote last week that I just read for you. And it sort of gets the benefit of that structure, of the experience of all that structure. So you still have meter in there a little bit. You still have internal rhymes. And it's just made all of my work better, including my prose.
It's a really good hint, I think, to say, you know what, if it's not up to the standard that you want, you can go back and finish it. It doesn't have to be done right there, right then, and it doesn't have to be perfect straight away. You can go back to it and improve it later. And funnily enough, it's one of the things that, as someone who's coming into writing in quite a new way, at first I was like, oh, it has to be perfect. I have to spend hours and hours at the drawing board trying to get it right. And inevitably you end up shooting yourself in the foot, don't you? Because you almost overwork the stuff that you're producing in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's also interesting to see that when the mood hits you, or when the inspiration hits you, that you do down tools and that you do write whatever it is that you need to write in that moment. Do you think that that's a good practice? Because I know that sometimes you can have an idea pop into your head and you'll think, oh, that's such a good idea, I'll remember it later, and then you completely forget about it.
Yeah, that has happened to me too many times when I'm like, oh, that's great. The hairs stand up on the back of my neck. Oh, that's a fire poem. I'm going to write that down in 3 hours when I'm done with my work here. And then 3 hours later, you sit there like, what was that again? And then you try to force it out. And it's like, oh, this is garbage. So if you have the capacity to sit down and just write it down, even if it's just that particular stanza that you got, just write that down. A lot of times people can't do that, and that is obviously a privilege that I have. I'm self-employed, I work from home, and I'm able to do that, but not everyone can do that. Some people have a lot of responsibilities. They've got second and third shifts that they have to do, carrying responsibilities at home. They might not have the time and space literally to sit down and write a poem. And so, this is part of my commitment to social justice, because if I am able to do this with the very privileged lifestyle that I have, can we think how much more amazing creative output there will be in the world if we've got a more just world where people feel safe, where people have enough to eat, they've got a roof over their head, and they've got the time to create. It's just amazing what could happen in that situation.
I can kind of see a bit of it happening now with the pandemic that's come in to play. I mean, obviously the devastation from it is horrifying. And I know that a lot of people not only have lost family members to the coronavirus, but also their jobs and their livelihoods. But equally, the flip side of it has been that so many people that thought they weren't capable of creativity have found that spark in them, and they're starting to explore it. So what advice would you give to people if they're coming into that space and going, you know what, maybe I could write the poem, or maybe I could paint the painting, but no, I'm not good enough. I'm not a poet, or I'm not a writer, or I'm not a painter, or whatever. What advice would you give them to keep going and just to do something with that creative spark?
I think that, there's a couple of things that are really useful advice. First of them is to understand that every artist or every writer has this point in their careers. And I think it was Ira Glass from the amazing podcast, This American Life, who talked about this. You get to this point where your taste, what you like, what you listen to, what you consume from others is better than when you can output or create yourself. And it's like, that's okay. And you will get through that point. You want to create a writing practice. Make sure you're either writing or editing for a little bit every day. Get a writing partner, somebody who is on the same journey as you, maybe a peer or maybe a mentor or somebody you can kind of be an apprentice of if that's something that's accessible to you. And just kind of write at them, like write knowing that you're going to have this audience who's going to read it. And, I have this amazing writer who I kind of study with, and I will just write a poem at her in Facebook Messenger, and she might just give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a heart react or something. She might not say a lot about it. We're not going to necessarily workshop it or pick it apart, but just knowing that there is at least one other person that's going to read it kind of gets the words flowing and helps me be a little bit accountable. There's a lot of really great writing communities and groups of people that are forming through social media, particularly during the lockdown. And I recommend people get involved with that. And just really focus on their work. Don't try to compare yourself to somebody who's been doing this for 30 years and makes a lot of money doing it. I am at the point with my writing where I know I keep improving, and I also know how shockingly much further that I have to go. But to be able to look at my work and to look back at stuff I've written 3 or 5 years ago, to see how much different what I'm writing is now, how improved it is, but also how my voice is still there. I have not, turned into some other author or some other writer. I'm still me. It's still recognizably me, but I can see how much progress I've made. I can see how much further I have to go.
I love that. I can remember actually that you were actually one of the first people that I met when I was performing my poetry for the first time locally in our Plymouth city, and it was such a joy. You did a poem, and I can't remember. I'm really sorry, but you were singing part of it. I seem to recall. Can you remember which one I'm talking about?
Probably "I Hope You Die." It's one of my little comedy songs.
Yeah, I think it was, because I was laughing a lot at that. And that really put me at ease, because I could see this talented woman who wasn't afraid of anything. And I knew that would be pressure for me to, follow suit and get up a few people after you at that particular event. But it really put me at ease, because when you're on stage, you seem to just have this relaxed, cool nature that really helps you to convey your message. And so I really want to know what tips would you give for people that are nervous about performing? Because your very presence at that point in my life was enough to make me feel more relaxed. But for those people that don't have a Margaret Corvid to come and sing and say, "I Hope You Die" poem, what advice would you give for their nerves?
It really is practice. It's muscle memory. We are animals. We're wild animals. We live in the wild. This world that we've created is like the natural or the unnatural habitat of the human being. And we can condition ourselves like we would a dog or another pet to produce the responses that we want. So, before I have a gig, I will go through a few very fixed, very rigid steps. Like I'm going to put on my battle armor. I'm going to put on my special gig hat. I'm going to have a bath, or shower before a gig, and do my appearance in some kind of a conscious way. And I'm going to make sure I've eaten some food. Might have a can of beer to limber up the vocal cords if it's in the evening. But it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're meditating for 10 minutes or you're doing some stretches or you're saying some affirmations or mantras or whatever. If you have sort of a practice, just follow it. And that will get you to the point of, okay, your whole limbic system is now expecting you to perform. And then you're able to do it. The other thing is I'm nervous before my reciting and I'm nervous after. I'm not nervous during it, which is a great benefit to me when I'm doing my performance, of course, because I got this kind of cool thing going on. My anxiety gets pushed to the side. It's a flow state. That's one of the reasons I really like it. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to be like, "Oh God, that person who just read is amazing and I can't follow them." Or afterwards, "Oh my goodness, I stumbled over those lines and I looked like a stupid person." I will be picking that stuff apart afterwards, but, it's okay during performance time.
Talking of performance time, would you please read us another one of your wonderful poems?
Okie dokie. So this is a poem called Bees, and this is based on something that's actually happened. Which I will talk about after, if you're interested. While we've been gone, they've been writing poems in there. Out of the wheeze of the vents and the slow drip of the faucet you turn half off after humming Happy Birthday and scrubbing your hands for the 30th time. They've been growing moss in there, in the black rubber seals of the head of legal's office windows, when she shut them too tight, leaving in a rush to get to her mother before the lockdown fell. While we've been gone, the lease expired. They didn't tell us, but it was on the 5th page of that PDF none of us read. They sold it to bees. Bees in the ceiling, in the break room behind the whispering fridge. The air grate below my favorite gargoyle has become LaGuardia, busier even, takeoffs and landings onto 1,000 balconies, pollinating chrysanthemums and the little wild flowers in uncleared gutters. My greatest embarrassment, the notes for the presentation that I was woefully underprepared for and offered in a trembling gasp, are now papyrus incubating the next generation. And all the cortisol I breathed out has escaped on the tiny breezes and made purple and white flowers, visited by the new owners, turned into crisp red radishes and a honey as rich and sorrowful as our city.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. Again, the imagery that you conjure is just impeccable. Please tell us what it is that you're talking about in this wonderful poem.
Sure thing. So I have a friend on Facebook who's a writer, and she does publicity for a business. And that business basically had been absent since the March lockdown. And when they came back to check on something, a beehive had installed itself indoors in one of the office rooms. It was the size of a large turkey. And they were able to get a beekeeper to rehome the bees, and they had basically 10 gallons of honey and beeswax. And I just loved the image, so I wrote this poem in a rush in the Facebook comments of that Facebook post from my friend.
That's unbelievable. I can't believe that she had a colony of bees just move in. That's amazing.
Yeah, and she made good PR out of it. They're going to give the honey to some of the employees, and I just think that's really moving, and it's a really powerful symbol for the lockdown. And for some reason, again, I relate to these bees, and I can interpret these bees as something that everyone can connect with regards to this pandemic.
Oh my goodness. And their story is, it's pretty similar to ours as well in terms of, I know that a lot of the bee colonies are being killed off by pesticides, which I suppose in turn is their virus, their pandemic. So there's a lot of correlation between us and everything else that's going on in nature at the moment. Absolutely. Funnily enough, one of my friends during the lockdown, again, she's a fellow artist, and she's not been working since March, and therefore hasn't used her car since last March. And in the time that we've been in lockdown, her car has started to grow foliage all around the wheels. It's come up so quickly that it's grown all around the bumpers of her car and basically has secured the car to the ground. It's unbelievable. And I asked her the other day, I was like, Nikki, and she won't mind me saying, Nikki, why haven't you moved your car? And she's like, I literally can't move it. I can't move it. I'm going to have to get someone to come and cut down all of the foliage that's grown around the wheels of her car because she can't physically move it. How incredible is that?
It's remarkable. So much of civilization has been put on pause during this pandemic response. And of course, so much of it has had to continue. And we've had this kind of tension between, are we going to save lives or are we going to save the economy? And obviously my view is that we should save lives, but there is this kind of knock-on effect, and we have to think about what's necessary in civilization and what we could do away with. Maybe in the long run we need fewer cars. Maybe we need a lot less air travel going on around the world, and maybe we need fewer office buildings and more homes. But through the whole thing, I think about the people who have had to be out in their cars. Like the first people who come to mind are domiciliary care workers who have to go from house to house giving people care, and then they have to, scrub up and make sure they're not transmitting the coronavirus without adequate PPE and at very low pay. So I know that for me, to be able to work from home, to not have to move the car, to have an office full of bees might be a privilege, because there's some people that have had to be in the front line keeping basic services going this whole time. So that's basically what that makes me think of.
In terms of coming togetherness, I think that the world is kind of split in two, isn't it? I mean, a lot of us have come together, we've managed to help each other even from afar, and yet the other half of society is falling apart in fear, and a lot of our systems, especially our social systems, are falling apart with them. And just as you rightly say, maybe we need fewer of those systems, or maybe fewer of those things that we consider so important, and more of our community and connectedness, and also our connectedness with nature, which comes across so amazingly in your poetry as well. I love that you are really conscious of that connection. It's beautiful. One question that I'd love to ask you, talking of take you back to poetry, is who has inspired you? Who are your literary heroes or heroines? And what is it that they've taught you about yourself and your own poetry?
Well, I don't really do heroes and heroines, but in terms of who has inspired me, there's an amazing poet named Marilyn Hacker, and she writes sonnets and other formal poems that just knock my head off of my frickin' neck. They're so good. It's just like, you're sitting there and you're kind of uttering expletives, and it's like, you such and such, how do you do that? And here I sit with like basically the equivalent of a couple of crayons and a broken pencil while you're painting the Sistine Chapel over there. Just her intensity at being able to convey emotion and visual images, and also politics. She's a very strongly political poet, very strongly left-wing. I kind of want to be Marilyn Hacker when I grow up. Another one would be Roz Cavaney, who is a science fiction writer and critic, and she also writes shockingly beautiful poems. And she writes sonnets as well. So I've really just been writing poems at her, and very deeply grateful for the time that she's given me, and to get more closely intimate and familiar with her work, and how that's been, the process of how that work is created. Like she's written English sonnet translations of the poems of Catalyst, and that's just come out. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's just so amazing. She studied classics in university, and she's able to bring this stuff to the modern day using a poetry form, a sonnet that's hundreds and hundreds of years old. But everything that she does is just so shockingly now and modern. And she also writes a lot of occasional poems and political poems that react to the present moment, whether it was the Capitol riots or the burning of Notre Dame or, refugee crisis here. She's just so able to communicate that. And that's what I want to be like as a poet. I want to be able to do that in my own voice.
I love hearing that people are writing sonnets, because obviously we talk about poetry, we talk about performance poetry, slam poetry, all of these different forms of conveying poetry, but no one talks about sonnets, and they're so brilliant.
Yeah, I love sonnets. Yeah, I haven't read you any of my sonnets yet, but I've got a few here if you want to hear one of them.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read you a funny one. This one is one of my flagship poems that, people actually request. It's actually one of my older poems, and it is 3 sonnets stuck end on end together like a sonnet centipede, to coin a metaphor. So this poem is called The Bare Bones of My Fucks. I hope it's okay if I swear.
It's fine, yes.
Is it okay to swear on? Yeah, okay. Because this poem is basically mostly swears. Behold the field in which I grow my fucks, as barren now as Thatcher's mouldering grave. The grey earth, a dry ditch, and 2 pink crocks, tufts of crabgrass sharp enough to shave. High above, the sun is beating down, and with it the ground opens up its cracks. All the gardeners spent the night in town, and now they're crashed out on the empty sacks. Their droning snores make harmony with flies, while crickets chirp and drink a hidden rill. They lick their lips, rub dust out of their eyes. Their yellow piss runs slowly down the hill. And one by one, they drive off in their trucks. Dust clouds, white glare, my field so bare of fucks. I tried to write my fucks down on a map, and naturally I drew 2 lines in war. They shot, gassed, bayoneted, raped, and stabbed, and died half-mourned by creditors and whores. And when the map was burned and streaked by soot, all rucked up, torn and bloodied by their fight, a few brave fucks did make the climb on foot and broke their plane by struggling towards the light. I was asleep, mired in a dream of fear. I woke up to the boom of paper guns. The burst of signal flares rattled my ears, but I could see to snatch them, every one. Caught, vermin, gasping, damning, cursed luck. Discarded, dying, stray sparks of my fucks. Mine were the fucks that launched 1,000 ships. Their rockets, coughing, hurled them to the stars. The whole earth watched their uneventful trip and cheered as they touched safely down on Mars. And as the robot arms unfurled like ferns and gracefully assembled shining domes, Earth dutifully forgot what it had learned and picked up trifles closer in to home. The ratings just kept slipping down the list. The care packets were scrapped for lack of funds. So slowly they forgot that they were missed. They planned it all to gasp their last as one. Burst suits, dried flesh, the Martian sun at dusk, the howling wind, the bare bones of my fucks.
I love it.
Basically, I was in this women's writers group on Facebook, secret group of writers, and the whole phrase, behold the field on which I grow my fucks, look thou upon it and see that it is barren, and all of the little kind of cross stitches and T-shirts and stuff you get from that now. And I just was writing this because, like, behold the field in which I grow my fucks is in the correct meter for a sonnet. And so I was just riffing on it, and this is what happened.
I absolutely love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about some of your proudest moments.
Okay, so people might not know, but I am a elected official. I am a politician. I'm a Plymouth Labor counselor for the Drake ward, which is in the middle of the city. It covers Mutley and Greenbank. And I must say, the whole process of getting selected, running, standing for council and getting elected was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it was one of the proudest moments of my life. And we also flipped the council from Tory control to Labour control. And it's wonderful to do something like that because it's something that you believe in. You're talking to all of these different kinds of people. And it's like, oh, I'm autistic. I know I'm weird. And they're all going to think I'm weird. And they did think I was weird. And they elected me anyway. So that's one of the moments that I'm really proud of. And the other one that I am really proud of is falling in love with my husband, David, and us getting married and having a life together, because he is just such a wonderful, wonderful person. And we've got a really positive relationship that we're just very lucky to have. We agree on so many things in terms of our values and our views in the world. There are plenty of things we disagree on, but he's one of the first men in my life who's ever actually apologized. Like he will send me a text when he's been a bit of a dick. Sorry, I was a dick. And I just treasure that, because it's so hard, particularly for men in our society, to apologize, and just all of the wonderful things that I've done, writing, getting involved with, Plymouth Labor, getting involved with all of the different work that I've done in journalism. All of the confidence that I have definitely comes from our relationship together as a team. It's that wonderful, solid foundation on which everything stands.
That makes my heart sing. It makes my heart sing to see someone lifting up their partner like that. On a previous podcast, I was speaking to a lovely gentleman who is a big hero in my eyes called Toby Gorniak. And he does a lot for our local community.
He's amazing.
Yeah. And he just holds his wife in such high regard and equal to him, as do I with my lovely husband as well. It was our wedding anniversary just 2 days ago. And we were just sat there going,
Yay, congratulations.
And we were just sat there thinking, my goodness, the time has just flown. And the reason that time has flown is because we just have the best time together. And I think it's so important to celebrate that. So it's so lovely to hear you say that about lovely David.
He's just wonderful, and he puts up with so much of my shit. And we just have the same sense of humor. We make silly jokes about poo, and unconscionable amount of yesterday was basically filled up with just holding up our computers or our phone screens at each other and sharing Bernie memes with each other and just dying yet again. It's like, it's so nice to be with somebody who is on the same page with stuff like that. And I'm really glad that you and Tim have such a great relationship yourselves.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings me on to the next question, which is, can you tell me a little bit about your bravest moment, physically, spiritually, or mentally?
I think, standing for council has definitely been one of my bravest moments. Standing up against abusers in the past, that's definitely been brave. There have been times either in my childhood or in communities I've been in when I've just said, nope, you're an abuser. I'm not letting you into this space that I manage. Or something like that. And also sort of standing up for my access needs. That's something I've learned to do since I was diagnosed with autism in 2017. And actually just saying, actually this isn't accessible to me for this reason. And this is how I can make that accessible to me, if you can sort that out and help me out with that. And that's just something that I get nervous and I have to be brave to do. And the way I see it is like, I don't really see bravery as a moment by moment thing. I mean, I've had some brave moments that you could maybe put in a movie or write a story about. But for me, the bravery of being open, saying, I'm here, I'm autistic, I'm a trauma survivor, these are my access needs. I really want to do this with you. Can we make that work? Is something I have to do on a daily basis. And if I look at it in aggregate, just being out about that, just being who I am is hugely brave. And I would, counsel anybody who has to do something like that to think of themselves as brave. A lot of times people who are disabled, they think, oh my God, I'm such a coward. I'm such a scaredy cat. I need this and that. And it's like, no, bravery is feeling the fear and doing the thing anyway. And it's doing it over an extended period of time. It's not just one moment, like in a anime cartoon where some superhero stuff happens. It's that really quiet day-to-day stuff.
It's so refreshing to hear someone say that. I know that through some of the people that I mentor outside of the podcast, they'll secretly and quietly say, by the way, I've got this happening in my mind or in my health, or by the way, this is what I need. And they say it with such quietness and such nervousness. And I always try to help them to embrace that space, because I obviously, being someone that doesn't have to deal with that kind of energy every single day, I'm really conscious of trying to help other people that have to deal with that kind of energy every single day. And I think you're absolutely right to say it's a brave step every single day. And especially in somewhere like the UK, where we're quite conservative in the way that we talk and what we share with people. And it's so refreshing to hear someone say, you know what? This is what I stand for. This is what I need. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to stand in that in an empowered way. So what advice would you give to younger people who have maybe just got diagnosed with autism or something similar, and they're having to express that for the first time? What would you say to them?
I think that the most important thing is to really find a community, even if that's just like a message board where there's other people posting their own experiences that you can read, even if you don't post anything yourself, and to reach out in whatever way you feel comfortable to that community and kind of gain the collective wisdom of the group, because this is not the first time somebody has been diagnosed with a disability or diagnosed autistic. This is not the first time somebody's need to ask for their access accommodations to be respected, and you can get a lot of wisdom there. The thing about disability and the thing about autism and various other neurodivergences is you might be the only person in your family that has it. So it's really important for you to find people who see you at least somewhat more in the way that you see yourself, and get that community and get that validation. I think that's really important. The other really important thing is that you don't have to tell everybody all the time, and you don't have to say, "Rah, this is me," and you open your shirt and there's this big A for autism, like the Superman logo on your chest, and like lines of light are coming off of your face or whatever. That's not how it works. It's more just like, hey, actually, can we turn off that fluorescent light? It's buzzing and it means I can't access, this meeting as well as everyone else. Can we use these other lights instead? Or hey, can I have extra time to do this task or to do this project because of how my brain works? And you don't have to tell everyone everything. You can just really ask for your access needs to be met. Make sure you know the law, make sure you know the Equalities Act and the disability law. And you don't have to be confrontational. It's like, just so you know, so I can do this thing really well, this is what I need in terms of support to do that. And you don't have to talk about your whole life story. It's just another practical step that needs to be taken. So it's even something that very emotionally closed off English people can do.
You heard it here first, listeners. So I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions before this wonderful interview ends, hopefully with another poem from yourself. So I'm going to flip it a little bit on its head and ask you a few out there questions. So the first one I'd like to ask you is, if there was a zombie apocalypse, where would you hide and what would you use as your protective weapon of choice?
Well, I was thinking about this, and you ask people in Plymouth where they're going to hide. And the first answer is usually Smeaton's Tower, which is this lighthouse that's got a little spiral staircase, so you can defend that really well. So that's one place. Another good place would be the Ship, which is the big building out by Derriford where the Sitel call center is. And it's this really modern building. The Plymouth Herald used to be in it, and it's got a boardroom at the top that's like one of those rotating restaurants on the top of a 1950s tower. And so that's nice and big boardroom. You've got visibility all around and you can block the access. And in terms of what weapons I would use, the weapons that I'm going to use are basically defensive weapons. So I'm just going to make sure my door's reinforced, my windows are reinforced, and I can trust everyone in there with me to respect my operational security guidelines. And that way, nobody's going to get bit by a zombie, and we're just going to sit there and eat our ramen noodles until all the zombies are gone.
I love that ramen noodles feature in this zombie apocalypse. That's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Lots of ramen noodles. Chicken flavor, baby.
Okay, so if you could only rescue 3 books from a fire, what would they be and why?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting one because it's like, are these the only books left in the world? Because if that's the case, there's going to be like an agricultural book, a disease book, and a car repair manual. But if this is just my own personal library, right now it would be the 5th season books by N.K. Jemisin. And that's just a really awesome science fiction series by this amazing author. I think she won the Hugo Award for all 3 books. And it's just so inventive. It's such a deeply inventive series with amazing characters and plotting. And if you are waiting for Patrick Rothfuss or George R.R. Martin to finish the goddamn books, then this is something you can read in the interim.
Yes, I agree with that. I wish they would hurry up.
Quite.
Okay, so what was the last song you listened to and why do you like it?
Well, I don't know if you've heard this, but there's this woman named Aaliyah Shepherd, and she is a soul singer in the States. And so there's just this video of her singing this song called Earth is Ghetto. I Want to Leave. And it is basically the song of this apocalypse 2-year period. And it's like a 1970s sort of funky soul song. And it's just mournful and funny. And I love it.
I'm so checking that out after this interview.
It will get stuck in your head. I promise you.
I can't wait. Okay, we're nearly there. If you were a movie title, what would it be?
Expletive. So you just have like the little asterisk and the percent sign, a little wingdings.
That so sums you up. I love it.
Yeah.
So before we ask you to read your final poem, I'd just like to ask you one more question. And that question is, if you could give any piece of advice to the world right now, what would you say?
Learn how to consent to risk. There's a woman named Katie Fox Hodis who's an academic studying the labor movement and sort of why shit is kind of falling apart a lot more than it did in the old days. And one of the things is that, when the miners' strike was happening and people didn't have their income coming in, they were starving, there was this whole campaign for people to donate money to the strike fund so people would be able to distribute food and have enough to eat. And the important part of that was not the charity, it was great, but the fact that the strikers could continue to strike because they knew their kids weren't going to starve. They knew they weren't going to lose their houses because people backed them up, and they were able to take that risk and consent to the risks. So when people say sending love, sending solidarity, that really grinds my gears because love is an action, solidarity is an action. So individuals can look and be like, how can I consent to some risk? How can I take a stand for people who are more marginalized than me in an environment where they're maybe not there? If I'm having a talk with my boss and, we're both white people in the room and my boss says or does something racist, and I say, hey, that's racist, that might make my boss pissed off and it might lose me some, social capital at my job, but it's really important that I do that. I need to consent to that risk because if millions of us do that, then the world will change. It will become a better place.
I'm so glad that you're in politics.
Thank you. I do my best.
So would you be so kind as to leave us with one more poem?
Certainly will, if my poems will unlock. So this is a poem that I wrote. Christmas is already past, but this is a Christmas poem that I wrote. That it's another one, which is several sonnets put together, and there's various Christmas hymn lyrics in here. So if you're familiar with that, you might try to pick them out. It's called "The Mass of Christ in a Time of Sundering." No ear may hear, but in this world of sin, the websites flicker eyes, ears echo bells and scan the fares, wheels howl in holy dins. Dead bodies washed ashore say their farewells to fishes. Cast nets to the other side, the tentacles all rotting in the trucks. Gas canisters that toss up with the tide. Best wishes, cards, good tidings, and good luck. The twinkling lights, cups half crushed, sleeping men curled tight, cement. Car parks full up by 7. Church packed, rafters all echo with the hymn. So God imparts the blessings of his heaven. O morning stars, together, holy birth, sing Christ the King and peace to men on earth. They ask me, Mum, when are you coming back? What child is this, hard orange chair, asleep? In dreams I run past buzzing drones, attack the rusted fence, pull down, and then I leap the river. Teeth and tinsel, limbs of trees, cruel Herod, wrathful king, in fear and rage. Wet papers held to light, the hum of bees, electric shock, the screams, the tearing page, the dizzy spells, the faint. No water. Cuffs, the little tiny child, lulai, lulay, the mission drive, the boxes packed with stuff, weeping with thanks, the mothers cart away their woe. Green lasers echo wings and eyes on runways. Little child, is it goodbye? O star of Bethlehem, flash white and blue, Carls pull onto the shoulder, dirty slush up to the handles, let processions through. The shining flags, gold braid girdled tightly, lush smoke, frankincense, the mayor in his chain, shaking the coins, the basket for the poor. Heavenly peace, the mothers in the rain pull tight their jackets, shuffle towards the doors. O holy night, the tasers all on charge, lights green and twinkling, ready, point and pull. Wise men a-riding, following the star, the Prince of Peace. Bring succor to the world, you saints, before the altar, bending, watch, through holes in glass, press fingertips and touch.
Absolutely wonderful poetry today, Margaret, as usual. If people want to follow you on social media, where can they find you, or where can they find your work?
Well, you can follow me on Facebook. Just search for Margaret Corvid, Twitter, Margaret Labor. And I have just joined Clubhouse, where I'm hoping to organize some poetry readings. And my name there is The Magpie.
Thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been such a pleasure. Margaret is a fascinating person to me. She's the epitome of reinvention and pushes boundaries both in her writing and in social justice. Having one foot in politics as well as in the art world, most people that meet her form instant opinions on who she might be and what she represents. Margaret remains unfazed by all of it. I consider anyone who stands in their truth to be brave. On top of standing up for what she believes in, Margaret also lives life with autism, which even today society hasn't quite adapted its constructs to represent fully. As a consequence, she is a striver, a fighter, adaptable and resilient, all of which she expresses so eloquently in words, an art form which allows her to represent her view of the world and is coloured with imagery that maybe the neurotypical are not accustomed to seeing. She doesn't confine herself to one space, regimen or design in life, and she certainly doesn't in her poetry. I've seen Margaret make audiences laugh in one breath and cry in the next. From singing to sonnets, how Margaret represents herself is fearless. This is not to say that she doesn't experience nerves, worries or anxieties about standing in the spotlight and voicing her thoughts, but she understands that actually that is the fun part. And if you can do it authentically, then other people's opinions on the matter are really up to them and not up to you. Margaret's imagination and exploration into the psychology of our minds and actions will get everyone thinking about their own. She dares you to represent others that are different to you, regardless of who is watching. She dares you to take judgment and opinion on the chin and represent your beliefs anyway, and to be the risk taker, the pioneer of new ideas, so that we can start movements as a society towards a better state of equality and representation. Change starts behind closed doors, in the locker rooms, at the family dinner table, and in the board meeting. Speaking the truth, even if it isn't the socially acceptable truth, is the only way we can change the constructs of our society for the better. Being really brave means bearing witness and doing the next right thing, even if it means shaking the very ground you stand on in order to do it. It can be a change in attitude, refusing to join in with dialogue that tears another sector or minority down, saying something in the moment, or choosing to hang out with a new tribe of people that are trying to adapt to a new set of values. Maybe it's time to expand your knowledge on a group of people that are different to you, to educate yourself on things like gender pronouns, gay rights, black culture, or in Margaret's case, neurodivergence. It's time to be inclusive in manner and thought and take some of the risks that may make you feel a little uncomfortable for a moment, but may change a whole conversation or set of actions in the future of many. For all of you that represent a new voice in writing, art, and especially in politics, take note from what Rumi once said. Raise your voice, not your words. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder. Next week on the show, we speak to singer-songwriter Joanna Cook, the notorious baby girl singing the blues, about soul music, working with the likes of Paloma Faith and the legendary Martha Reeves, and her life in the 21st century soul scene. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review on Apple Podcasts, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share the show with your friends by following us at the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or on Twitter at Moment Brave, or just follow the Linktree on all of our social media platforms. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with your own stories, and remember, your brave moment starts now.